on the Twitches. All right, we're live. Cool. Okay, let's do this. Hey folks, welcome back to the Dev Twitch stream. My name is Nick Taylor. I am a lead software engineer at Forem. Forem is the software that powers dev.
And I'm Christina Gorton, developer advocate at Forem. And today we are talking all things Hacktoberfest and open source and all that wonderful stuff. So I think we'll start out with, what is Hacktoberfest? Nick, do you want to start? You want me to start? What do you want to do there?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I can go ahead. I mean, it's a month-long, I would say, celebration of open source. It's a great time for folks to learn new things potentially. Um, you know, one of the things I like about open source is I'm always terrible at creating projects myself. So I'm like, hey, I want to learn this, so I'm gonna go contribute to an existing project, and that's what I've done a lot. And there's so many different things out there that you know you can literally probably pick anything, any kind of technology or any kind of interest. It's probably out there, and we can talk about ways to find some of these projects later. The other thing too is, if you can also create your own project, maybe you have something you've been wanting to create, and Hacktoberfest is a great time because you could potentially have other people helping you out with your project and collaborating. And, it's a great way to kind of become a part of the developer community as well and, meet some new people. That's kind of my TLDR.
Yeah,
What about
definitely.
yourself?
It's a time I see both for contributors and maintainers, and there's like a different side to that. Just like you were mentioning, like if you have a project, maybe you want people to contribute to it. There are some etiquette guidelines, I'd say, that I think really got started talking about last year. There was a lot of stuff with Hacktoberfest that maintainers were kind of upset about because
Yeah,
anyone could just put in issues for anything, and it wasn't like controlled by maintainers. They couldn't say no, I don't want like
yeah,
Hacktoberfest people contributing. So something to think about as you're going along and you're starting to look at this is look at the guidelines that they have on the DigitalOcean site, which I linked just a second ago, and make
yeah,
sure that maintainers want you contributing.
yeah,
Most maintainers do. But just, double check, make sure it's okay. A lot of projects will have a Hacktoberfest label. We do
yeah,
on Forum, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And look for those kinds of issues to work on that are sometimes you'll just see a whole repository say like they have Hacktoberfest, and that's fine too.
yeah,
And then the only other thing I wanted to say before we kind of get into more things is, and this is not against anyone at all, some people are very enthusiastic the first few days, and they go into a project and they start asking to be assigned to lots and lots of issues. That's probably not the best for you as a contributor or for the maintainers, because you want
yeah,
to really think about quality versus quantity, even though people are trying to get a certain amount for Hacktoberfest. What I've found in the past as someone who maintains our large open source repo is that if someone asks to be assigned to a bunch of things, they'll probably only work on one of them or maybe
yeah,
two of them. So just pick one or two at a time. It's better for you, it's better for the maintainers, and you can
yeah.
always find another issue afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of touch on that, uh, I do understand to some degree people are like, I want the t-shirt. Like that is a lot of motivation for some people. And don't get me wrong, I like swag too. I don't have that old Meteor shirt on right now. I wore the Hacktoberfest one yesterday, but I should have worn that today. That was bad clothes scheduling on my part. But yeah. Yeah, like Christina said, don't try to hoard the issues. Like, don't get me wrong, it's great getting the t-shirt, or that you can also plant a tree, whatever you think is best for you, and there's stickers and stuff, and that's all amazing. Like I love t-shirts too, I won't lie. But it's the spirit of Hacktoberfest is really just making some meaningful contributions and having fun meeting some people in the community. And the contributions, they vary. I've heard people in the past say, oh, like, you're not a dev, you updated the documentation. That's totally bogus. do not listen to anybody that says that. I actually updated, we're going to talk about Gitpod later, but I updated a bunch of our
Mm-hmm.
documentation to use Gitpod because if I hadn't done that, people would be like, well, I'm not sure what's happening now and stuff. So, and if you see a lot of, not necessarily every project, but a lot of successful projects have really good documentation. You know, people knock jQuery, but jQuery is still widely popular. It has amazing documentation. The React project, the Vue project, if we're talking front end stuff. A lot of Microsoft projects have really great documentation. It's super important. Even ourselves, we have. I don't know if it's a good segue to drop our documentation, but we
You did.
have. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we have our documentation. It's live if you go to developers.forem.com, but there is a repository there, and there probably is some stuff that needs improvements in there. I don't know if we've tagged stuff
Mm-hmm.
for Hacktoberfest in there or not, Christina, but we can maybe take a peek in there too.
No, I
But
was
yeah,
going to mention that if you do find something in the docs, we've had a few people the last 2 days who have found some like good legitimate things like broken links and stuff that need to be fixed.
yeah,
They've opened them in our Forem repo, which is like our main repository. And if you want to contribute to that, just add it to the Forem docs repository instead, and I can always go back and label it Hacktoberfest for you. Um, and
yeah,
this is one of those things that I think also takes a little bit of a caveat of like if you're thinking of quality and thinking of the sanity of maintainers, they don't always appreciate if you come in and say something like, "Hey, you're missing." Not that these things aren't important; they are. So
yeah,
some some repositories are fine with it, but if there's something like a comma missing or you're trying to rearrange how they've described something, which I've seen a lot in the past, they may
yeah,
close your PR. So just be aware
yeah,
that it doesn't necessarily mean all projects will, but some of them will. So you might want to create an issue and talk about it first. Like, is this
yeah.
appropriate for me to create a PR for before you do that?
Yeah, and yeah, and what Christina said, 100%. You know, typically don't create pull requests just without any issue because the thing is, one we have there's a site we have forum.dev. It's like our discussions area for the forum project, and you know, you might be like, oh, okay, I want to add this feature, so I'm going to put a pull request up. But it's very likely that we won't accept it, not because we don't appreciate the contribution. It's more we like to have discussions about and it's not just our project. A lot of projects will be like,
Mm-hmm.
well, should we add this feature? Okay, maybe, but maybe not this way, So we just like having the discussion, and then typically issues will be created. If there isn't one too, like definitely start off at forum.dev, see what's going on there. It also tells you what's been happening in the product. Um, but yeah, if you're not sharing, you're like, I want to create a contribution. I would definitely create an issue first, like Christina said, because it also helps us track these things too.
Yeah.
And a lot of projects appreciate, just having an issue associated to it. Um,
Yeah, and I think we should touch a little bit before we go on anything else. Kind of for anyone new to contributing, the fear that might be coming there. I just wrote a post on this for anyone
yeah, yeah,
who might not have contributed before, and for a lot of people, it's daunting thinking about going into a project, trying to find an issue, trying to create a PR if they've never done that before. So
yeah,
I think you and I probably both have some advice on this, and we can touch on that. I would say the biggest one Nick just said there is that you do want to create an issue and you want to communicate. So
yeah.
if you're afraid of something, if you don't know how to do it, communicate with the maintainers because most people are
Hmm.
happy to help you figure
Yeah,
out what you need to do. But even before that, look for a contributing guide on a
yeah,
repository. Almost anyone who wants contributors is going to have a contributing guide, and you're going to
yeah,
find a lot of information on there.
yeah, for sure.
I don't know
And
if you have
and
other things you want to add, Nick.
yeah, for sure. We're definitely talking about some forum specific stuff today, like what issues we have open and stuff. But a lot of the
Hmm.
information we're giving here, like Christina alluded to, it's really related to any project for open source for Hacktoberfest or even outside of Hacktoberfest. we could talk about, I guess briefly, because you mentioned the contributing guide, kind of the health of a project in the sense that, you know, if you're looking to contribute to a project, definitely, see if there's a contributing guide, code of
Mm,
conduct, the README, uh, on the flip side though, like if people are just getting started out with their projects, I've started
yeah.
projects before too, you don't have all the documentation up right away. That could actually potentially be a good thing to help
Yeah.
on a project during Hacktoberfest because maybe it's just one person, they've got something great up there, but they just because it's people do these things in their spare time, they just haven't got around to it yet. So you could always, again, I would start it if they have GitHub discussions enabled, maybe start a discussion there, or if not, create an issue like, hey, I started the project and I noticed there's the installation guide is either missing or there's not much to it. Could I,
Yeah.
help improve that documentation? So, or even create it. Yeah, and Christina dropped a link about fears of contributing, and I'm gonna drop a link in as well. There's this site called firstpr.me, and I'm dropping
Mm,
my first PR there. Now I'm gonna talk about I. I think I can't remember the date. I'll click on the link to double check. It's either 2015 or 7 years ago. So let me just see. Um, yeah, it was a while ago. But yeah, I guess it was about 6 years. Yeah, it was about 6 years ago then. So I was terrified to,
mhm,
for many reasons to contribute to open source. Um, I was not familiar with Git that much. So that alone, and we've
mm,
met because we pair on this stream as well, and I pair with other folks outside of the stream. And one thing that a lot of folks new to open source or even new to programming is they're very intimidated by Git. And, it's okay. Like it's not obvious. And what I'd suggest there is, try and learn some of the basics. And I'm definitely not going to say you have to do the command line way of things because everybody learns differently. Everybody's productive in a different way. What I like to tell people is, you know what? Like for me, on Git, I'm pretty comfortable in the command line. I'm still not like a Git expert, but there's a lot of stuff that I do for my day to day that I know how to do it, and I'm just comfortable doing it on the command line because it's faster for me. But, somebody else, it could just totally block them in terms of productivity. So there's nothing wrong with having
mhm,
like, a GUI, like a user interfaced, Git client. That's totally fine.
mhm,
So, but there are some, I'll try and find them later, maybe when Christina's chatting in. I have a couple links. They're from Dev 2. One's from Lydia Haley, who does a lot of really great posts with a lot of images, and I think some of them are interactive as well. So, and she just explains concepts really well, and she has a really great post on Git, and there's another one. They're in a talk I gave a few days ago, so I'm gonna open up my slide deck in a bit, and I'll pull those out.
mm,
So there's the whole like paralyzed fear of Git, people will be like, okay, I committed my stuff. I think I created a branch. I don't know where things went. Oh no, I have to update the project because my local project because other people worked on it. So, those are definitely genuine things that if you're not, if you're just starting off, it's totally normal to not know what's
mhm.
going on. I've messed up my code base so many times with Git when I first started off, and it still happens sometimes. So
Yeah.
definitely reach out for help. Not just from the maintainers, but like if you're in developer communities too. But there's a lot of great documentation, and I'll drop those two links that I have in a bit. Um, yeah, aside from that, I'm probably repeating some of the stuff you're saying here, Christina, but always ask questions. It's better to ask questions than assume things because if you, the and we're going to talk about templates and stuff in our project, and this is something that's in a lot of projects, but the main goal for us is we're super happy that you're contributing to the project and we want you to be successful, so we want to make it as easy
Mhm.
as possible for you. So the
Yes.
questions help both of us, like, hey, I was thinking of, popping this up to the top right. And then, maybe one of our designers might say, well, actually, it makes more sense here from a user's, a UX standpoint, or there's some accessible issues. So that's why we're suggesting here. Maybe,
Hmm.
some back end work. People are like, well, I was thinking of adding these methods to this model in the back end. And somebody might say, well, that doesn't make sense. So it's just good to have these discussions.
Yeah.
And, you know, don't the other thing too is, like I alluded to with when I shared my first PR there, I was just super stressed to push it up to create my pull requests and stuff. But honestly,
Hmm.
once it went up, it wasn't perfect, and this was earlier on when, so they didn't have tools like Prettier or like formatting tools. So a lot of the pull request review was really like, can you fix this? I can't read it that well, but there was other issues too. But just get it out there, because it doesn't have, the first thing you put up there, think of it like a work in progress, or there's most likely going to be feedback, and that's totally normal, so it's okay. Just get it up there, and then just start the discussion in the pull request, and kind of go from there. And we're, like I said, we're here to help you. We're super glad that folks are contributing to the project, so we want you to be successful. um, I don't know if you have
I have a
anything
few
else
things to
to say. I'm
add.
gonna
Yeah, I got a few things to
Yeah.
add there. So one, I dropped a GitHub, like their learning lab link. It's an introduction to
Okay.
GitHub. So when Nick was talking about just kind of the fear of like Git in general, this is something I even did, like I think a year or so ago before I even joined this team, just doing it again because I
Okay.
had been working in like Bitbucket and AWS and a bunch of other stuff and not GitHub for a while. So
Okay.
it's really helpful. It walks you through like how to create an issue, how to create a PR, how to change your PR if you get feedback. It goes through everything step by step for you, and it's interactive. So you're doing it on GitHub and they're walking you through everything. It's really helpful for anyone who needs just to kind of catch up on something. Another
Yeah.
thing where Nick was talking about, not just after you've had some discussion, get a PR up and then you can discuss there. Another option you can have, which I mentioned in the article, have fear and contribute anyways, is that you now have draft PRs. So if you don't
Yeah.
want someone to like review your stuff necessarily, but you do want to have like discussion and you want to be putting stuff up there, you can do that as well. Like you can create a draft PR instead, and that's an option for you if you're still trying to like figure everything out while trying to contribute.
Yeah, for sure. No, these are all great points. Yeah, and we can talk a bit more about the draft PRs and the pull request templates shortly. I
Mm-hmm.
dropped a link to a slide deck from a talk I gave this week for Forem and Hacktoberfest. But I'm just going through that slide deck real quick because I just want to find those two Git links, because I think they're really great resources. Here, where
Cool.
is
While you're
it?
doing that, I'm going to drop a link to the issues that we do have open right now because we can talk
Yeah.
about that in just a few minutes. And I'm going to also drop the link to the official like Dev Hacktoberfest
Okay. Yeah.
announcement
Yeah.
for everyone so that you have more information uh, uh, for that as well. So
Yeah, no, for
second,
sure.
dropping those
I
links.
I think it was in my other slide deck. Give me 2 seconds here. Get,
Nice.
get.
Dev Diesel said that they're going to contribute for the first time. So,
Ooh,
uh,
nice.
yay! What project are you hoping to contribute to? If you want to put in the chat, maybe you don't know yet, and that's okay too.
Okay, I can't find those links right now. They're definitely in my slide deck though, but I'm just looking through her. I think it's Git visualized. I'm just looking on Dev2 here. Um, but yeah, we can talk a bit about, maybe we could maybe you could start the conversation about just templates and why we might use them. And I'm just gonna spend one more second here just trying to find these two links
Yeah,
here.
I think at some point it'd be good if you shared, but I'll give you time to look through.
Yeah.
But I will talk kind of higher level of templates and why we use them. I'm one of the ones who put a lot of the templates recently for like our issues in our forum/forum repository, our main repository for forum. And these are our ways that make it easier for the maintainer and the contributor. So it's both ways.
Okay.
We have bug reports. You can create a bug report, and there's a template for that, and it has like a lot of information that we are looking for, and that's for a
Hmm.
good reason. Because sometimes we get people opening up a bug report and they'll say something like very vague.
Okay.
Just like, and they're not telling us, is this mobile? Is this on a browser? Is this in this area of dev? Is this a different forum? Because dev is our like big forum, but there are other forums
Yeah.
too. So we ask more descriptive like questions like, hey, can you describe the bug clearly that you're seeing? Can you give us steps to reproduce that? Like I would go here, click here, do this. These
Yeah.
are all very helpful so that we can find the bug quickly and make sure that we're actually we can see the bug too. We ask for
Hmm.
like desktop if it's desktop, what browser you're using, or the device. And these are all again just things to make it easier for everyone looking at this bug report. Anyone who might want to contribute to it, but also
Yeah.
as maintainers, making sure it's actually a bug first. We want to make
Cool.
sure
Cool.
it is a bug and we can get it worked on. So that's for issues. We also
Yeah.
have a few other issue templates, which you might see other projects have. For our
Yeah.
feature requests, like Nick mentioned a few minutes ago, we actually have you go to forum.devs because we have a discussion. A lot of projects do that now. They call it like having an RFC process, which is like a request for comments before any kind of feature is implemented. I was just
Yeah.
talking to Evan Yu, the creator of Vue, for the Dev Discuss podcast, and that's what they were saying. Their whole process is they have an RFC. You can't just open up like feature requests on their repository that way. And
Yeah.
then we also have like a way to get over to forum.dev. And if you have ever used our self-host, which we have Forum self-host as a project where you can host your own forums, there is a link to get there to report bugs as well. I need to add one for our documentation. Haven't done that yet, but that's another one as well. So that's our
Cool.
issues
Yeah.
templates.
Yeah, and we can talk about the pull request template now. I can share my screen if you want, or did you have something else you
Mhm.
wanna? Okay.
Nope, I figured that would move right into PRs. So.
Nice. All right. Cool. I'm just gonna share my screen. Pull request template. There we go. Yeah, and I'm sure it's gonna. I lost my. There we go. Just gonna make it a little bigger. Christina's on the big screen now. What's going on? There we go.
Always.
Okay. And I'm not going to make the mistake. This happened to me on a Zoom the other day. I was trying to scroll the document in the Zoom screen share. And I'm like, it's not, what's wrong with my mouse? And so I'm just going to zoom this in a bit in case folks are having a little trouble seeing this. So when you go to create a pull request, we have a pull request template. I'm just in the document right now in our repository in the preview mode of the markdown, but I'm just going to talk through what's in here because people might get overwhelmed, maybe they won't, but either way, it's just good to talk about it. So when you have a pull request, you're going to want to, we definitely, in regards to all the templates, we really ask that you fill it out to the best of your abilities. And this is, it's really not to be annoying, like, like it's not like you're going to renew your license and you have to fill out all these things. It's really, uh, the main reason is it captures as much information as possible about the work you did, which helps the person reviewing it. Because the
Hmm.
other thing you have to remember is, one, we're not your coworkers, so it's not like you can tap us on Slack and say like, hey, what
Yeah.
about this thing? So we work in an asynchronous context, so meaning it's like you might comment and then sometimes people might answer in a few hours, but usually, sometime in a reasonable amount of time, usually within 1 to 3 days. It depends on what's going on
Hmm.
and stuff. But so like, if you just put up the pull request and it's like it's finished and then somebody goes to review it, the code will be up there or the documentation changes, but we might not have any context really. So it's helpful to just fill this out. And this is a skill that I think super important regardless, because a lot of folks are working in a remote context now in terms of work as well. So, and a lot of our industry at least is kind of moving more towards remote. So these are great skills to practice regardless, that
Mm-hmm.
could be helpful for your work.
Yeah,
So
before you
I'll
go
just go
on, I
through
just want to
here.
mention,
Yeah, yeah.
just to kind of reiterate that when I was working with our Major League Hacking interns that they weren't interns, fellows for Major League Hacking, which is
Yeah,
a group that does a lot of open source work, and we have several people every so often that work with us. One of their biggest things that they always say at the end is, wow, getting reviews and like going through the review process and that communication back and forth is so helpful. And it's one of the things that like
yeah,
helped me get a job, or one of the things that I just really improved on. And so it is very valuable to like take the time to go through these
yeah,
PRs, put the work in, and then communicate in a way that's um, beneficial to everyone. Because like Nick said, I
yeah.
mean, we technically work full time on our open
Yeah,
source project,
I
but
know we're
most
paid to work in
maintainers
open source. It's a little different, but
don't. Yeah. So they may not like that back and forth question of like, if you're just giving a tiny bit of information and you're not giving them as much as you can, it's going to get very frustrating. So for both of you.
yeah. And the other reason to fill it out and to have these discussions in the pull request is it's for future as well, because like for
Mm-hmm.
example, you know we maybe there's a bug that got introduced in a pull request, or maybe there's no bug, but like somebody's going to go work on something else now, and if they can come back to the pull request, they can read the what the context of this was, why decisions were made. It's super helpful. And not only
Mm-hmm.
that, but because this is all up on GitHub, it's publicly searchable. So you might be looking for how to fix a bug one day, and all of a sudden you end up on somebody's pull request because it got indexed by Google, and it's like, oh, so that's how they fixed that. So it's just super helpful. So yeah, so we'll go through the sections here briefly. So the first part I think is pretty self-explanatory, but it's like, what kind of pull request is it? Is it a bug fix, a feature, maybe some refactoring, documentation update? um, the description, kind of give like a brief statement, or like one or two lines maybe about like what is this pull request about.
Mm-hmm.
um, the next section is the related tickets and documents. And you know what, I think I might just open up my own pull request just because it's actually filled out. Give me two
Yeah.
seconds here.
And seeing the words that some people don't know about, like closes and things, I think would be good to kind of mention in that part if you aren't already planning on doing that.
Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, we'll do a documentation update one. This is the one I was talking
Mhm.
about Gitpod. So, okay. Oh no, this isn't our documentation. It doesn't have the template.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I think I
something we
only
have
just
to do.
recently put the template. No, I think I just recently put it one, but
Uh,
I
okay.
only
All right,
just recently got permissions for it.
I'll look at this one. This was I fixed an accessibility issue. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so you can see here I marked it as a bug fix. I gave a brief explanation of what the issue was,
Mm-hmm.
and one thing that's super important is we were talking about creating an issue before, and the reason being too is you can link it to the pull request, which is super helpful because there was probably
Mm-hmm.
discussion going on in the issue itself, but there might also be discussions in the pull request. And
Yeah.
a neat thing you can do in GitHub, I don't know, because I know GitLab is supported in Hacktoberfest now. I don't know if they have this functionality or not, but if you prefix an issue in like just in the pull request body, and you prefix it with closes, it will automatically close the issue associated to that pull request. And it's not a major thing, but it's a kind of like a nice little thing for maintainers, because then they don't have to go back and then close the issue. And you can see on the right here it says linked issues, and then it says it's closed now. So that's super helpful. And you can have more than one in here, and it doesn't have to be just GitHub issues or other related pull requests. um, the next thing is the QA instructions, so quality assurance. So this is, again, and I say this like to the best of your knowledge, like try and fill out the template as best as possible. So if you fixed a bug, try and, write down the steps to do it. So that's what I did here.
Mhm.
I'm also, because this was an issue with the user interface, I provided some screenshots. So if you're doing back-end work, you probably won't be providing screenshots unless maybe it affects how something shows up on a page, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, I said here, like in this case, I was fixing an accessibility issue. So I was mentioning you need to install a browser extension. I say how to do that. Then I show a screenshot of, this is from the accessibility tool. So it's showing me what the error was. And then this is me showing it after I fixed it. And
Hmm.
the screenshots are super helpful, not just because it's for like user interface stuff, but for somebody who's initially just kind of looking at a pull request. If you did something
Yeah.
like rework, the view of the article, which one of my coworkers did the other day, he provided the before and after, so I could visually see like what the big changes were. I still reviewed it, but it's just kind of a nice way to see, oh, okay, yeah. And sometimes and this is typically more related to the user interface or the experience. Is sometimes people put Loom videos or they'll upload
Hmm.
a short movie. Um,
Yeah.
Again, just do what you think's best, and there'll be feedback anyways.
Hmm.
And then so we have after that we have another section which is really specific to the user interfaces if there's any accessibility concerns.
Hmm.
Um, so, and if we come back to the template here, this is when it's not filled out. You'll see it has a link to our documentation, and I'll just open that real quick. So we have some really good accessibility documentation here. This was
Yeah.
first started by Marcy Sutton, who is a accessibility expert in the field. She's pretty awesome. She helped us out with the Forem project last fall. So she kickstarted this whole section here. And it's not meant to be a complete section on how to fix every known issue in accessibility. It provides you with a really good primer because some people, they might be new to accessibility or they're not sure how to
Hmm.
maybe test these things. And again, we're here to help as well. So, you know, definitely ask questions still. Um, but if we come back to the issue I was fixing, why is my mouse not working? Okay. Yeah. So if we come down a bit further here, it asks, were tests added? And in my particular case, I said no because I literally changed an HTML element tag name. So it
Hmm.
doesn't, in my opinion, it didn't warrant having a test. But the way our template works here is, and I find this is super effective. An ex coworker of ours, Vaidehi Joshi, adds this. If I go to the uncompleted one, it says, "Did you add tests?" Yes, you'll check that off, but most likely. But if you say no, you have to say, "And this is why." And every time I see this, I'm like, you know what? This probably needs a test. So,
Mm.
but if there is a good reason that you don't need a test, just put a brief statement why, like how I
Yeah.
did in this example here. So it was just an HTML element tag change only. The other important part is the third option, which is I need help writing tests, and don't be shy to click on this. If you're just starting your journey, or maybe even if you're not that familiar with testing, we're here to help too. We have lots of examples in the code base for the back end, for the front end. So we're talking like unit tests, integration tests,
Hey,
some
Nick,
component tests
can I
for,
stop you just for one
yeah,
second? I know you're telling
yeah.
great information, but your mic keeps doing something funky, and I don't know if it's like just on my end or it keeps going like really,
Okay.
really loud, and then a little bit of static, and then it will like go back softer. So just want to make sure
That's really weird.
we
I'm gonna
touched on
turn my
that.
gain down a bit. If
Okay.
uh, if anybody in the chat can just let me know if my microphone sounds weird. My voice sounded weird there a second ago, but anyways, yeah, I turned down the gain. Maybe that's it.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so if you need help writing tests, we have plenty of examples, but we'll also help guide you. And for example, uh, we have end-to-end tests that have been in place since I think I got it in place in January. So we've been writing a lot of end-to-end tests.
Mhm.
I've encountered a lot of folks who've never written those before, so we have lots of examples. But again, we'll help coach you through doing some of those, and that's some good experience to have too if you're able to do end-to-end tests. But we have all kinds of tests in there.
Yeah.
Um, that's pretty much most of it. This section here is for it. It's explicitly for the Forem core team. It's really more for us to let our team know like what should we do in certain scenarios. Feel free to read through it if you'd like to, but and then there's two sections that remain. There's, if the pull request you're working on, there's some kind of deployment task that needs to be done, just document it there. If you don't know if there's supposed to be, I'm pretty sure once it gets reviewed, somebody will probably raise like that issue to say,
Hmm.
oh yeah, well, you're migrating something in the database, but to do that, we need to, I don't know, empty the cache on some articles or something. So,
Yeah.
but if you do know what to put there, go ahead. And we'll go with the last one, which is my favorite part, which is adding an animated
The most
GIF.
important part. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun putting these in. Sometimes I get creative. When we had a bunch of fixing lint issues in the front end, I had lots of dryer lint animated GIFs.
Oh, yeah.
So anyways, yeah, so that's kind of that in a nutshell. And again, you know, uh, just go ahead and fill it out as best to your knowledge as possible. Because, I know you might not know everything to put there, but whatever you can put in there is super helpful.
Yeah, and
Um,
something to
yeah,
note, that was definitely how to do it on Forum, which we want to be talking about because we would love you to contribute to Forum. But
yeah,
anytime you go to a new project, just for general information on like contributing, make sure you are
yeah,
looking at you are looking through everyone's like templates if they have them. If they don't have
yeah,
a template, because sometimes people just don't have the time, or if they are just like a single person doing a project, you can always
yeah,
ask like, is there a certain way you would like me to do this? The same with when you're putting your PR in particular, the contributing guide
yeah,
should tell you like any kind of naming conventions they might want, how they want you to branch the and fork the project and stuff like that. So if they don't have that information, just take the time to ask because they will appreciate it if you take the time to ask and they don't have that information. So.
yeah. And the other thing too is you could always create an issue and say, "Oh, I was wondering, would you like me to create an issue template or a pull request template?"
Hmm.
And then they might be like, "Hey, that's a great idea." And then you can start a discussion about like what should go in there, and then that could
Yeah.
be another way to contribute. And this is something super helpful for the maintainers and the contributors for the reasons we've already talked about. So, um, yeah, so there's
The only thing
that.
with that is that they would have to give you a lot of permissions. So you will want to discuss that with them before,
Yeah,
you try to add that stuff in because you have to have certain permissions to be able to add uh, a PR template and things. So,
yeah, yeah. No, good
yeah.
point. Good point. Um, but yeah, and then I think yeah, so that covers issues and templates, and I guess we'll get to Gitpod in a bit, but another thing to be mindful of, and I've talked about this several times, and so is Christina, is you know yes, these are projects, but there's people behind it. It, I've I've typically not had issues with people, but there are some people who are just like, hey, like your project sucks, it doesn't do what I need it to do, fix it, that's not constructive, it's not helpful, and you know, it's just that's just being a terrible human, honestly. Just be remember that there's people behind these projects, and just remember to be kind, like there's no reason to talk like that in an issue, or write something like that in an issue, like um but I'll say this is, if you're a maintainer and you get stuff like that, one thing that I've always found fun to do to kind of answer to that is, oh, hey, yes, looking forward to your pull request, or something, just because like they're complaining about something.
This is why
So,
I'm
and
the
that,
one that has to chat with everyone on our project. No.
yeah, yeah. So, but I'll be honest, in general, my experiences have been pretty solid in open source. But
Mhm.
just wanted to remind people that there are people behind the projects, and like, you know, we I'll speak for our project because we are paid to work in open source. We're pretty good about getting back to folks normally.
Mhm.
Some things slip through the cracks sometimes. I know like one time, I think like year and a half ago, somebody had a pull request up, and I was reviewing it, but then I'd went on vacation. So when I got back, I
Mhm.
said, "Oh, hey, I was on vacation, taking a peek at it now."
Yeah.
And but yeah, just be, I guess talk well, hopefully you're kind in real life too. So like just talk to the people in the PRs like you would to people in your real life, I guess.
Here's
Hopefully
how
that's
I
good.
try to look at it, as I'm a person who discusses this with a lot of people, is that if someone's coming into your repository a little bit heated, one, hey, they're passionate about your project, right?
Yeah.
That's good. There's some passion there, but that person who is commenting in a way that's not great needs to also realize that as an open source project, anyone can later on find your comment, see the way you
Yeah.
talk to people in open source, and that might not be the best thing when an employer is looking at your GitHub history. So keep that in
Yeah,
mind.
exactly.
Uh, love your passion, love that you're excited or maybe frustrated or something, but learn ways to communicate
Yeah.
that frustration or that passion in a non-negative way. It doesn't mean you have to be like all sunshines and rainbows with everything
Yeah.
you comment on, but you can just explain. I think the thing
Yeah.
is like try to take the emotion out of like a lot of the stuff you're putting in and just explain what the problem you're having is, and you're
Yeah.
gonna get a much better response from everyone that way.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're doing reviews, like I mean, if you're a contributor, somebody's going to review it. One thing I try to do is I try to remove, when I'm reviewing, to say it's like so and so don't do this. It's more like for example, if I could say something like you need to reformat this, or you did this incorrectly. Use this method instead. Instead of saying something like that, I could just say this method needs to be called like this. And it
Hmm.
it changes the tone of the comment. And
Yeah.
there's there's a really great site, a project called Conventional Comments. I've given a talk about it before, but I'm gonna find the site. It's not for everybody, but I enjoy the way they do things. So you can have things like, and there's some screenshots in this site that show you kind of how it works. But for example, like, and if you look at pull requests I've reviewed, you'll see that I write my comments like this typically. So it'll be like something like refactor blocking, and then I'll say, uh, this needs to have a test, for example.
Hmm.
Or maybe it's something I'm not really a fan of, but it's really not going to affect the pull request. I could say like nitpick, non-blocking, and then like prefer doing this or something. By
Hmm.
doing that, you're saying like it's okay, go ahead. In that particular case, I would do it this way, but like it's still fine to merge. And
Yeah.
I find doing things like that it helps add, you know because then it kind of distinguishes like, okay, what this comment is versus that other one. Like the other one, it's clear like this can't be merged until this is fixed. and
Hmm.
and I know the Netlify team, like Jason Langsdorff team, the developer experience team. I can't remember what they call it, but they talk about like issues and stuff. Like a big problem will be like a boulder emoji, and then like they'll have a small
Hmm.
stone for something, and I forget what it's called, but it's I can't remember her name. She was one of the front end engineers there. I think she might be a manager now, but she had a post about it. But it's just another way, kind of similar to kind of what I'm talking about in conventional comments. And she even
Yeah.
talked about that. But it's something I'd suggest checking out. It's not something you have to do, but I find the project really interesting.
Yeah, I always
Okay,
appreciate when I
cool.
get like the, non-blocking, but like I said, like feedback is hard for most people to take in general. You should know if you're going to be contributing to open source, you will probably get feedback on your PR, and that's okay. That's a good thing. You want to get
Yeah,
feedback to make it the best like thing as possible. So just go into that with like the open mind of like this is a good thing. Someone's taking the time to like review my code and help me do better. But things like
yeah,
that you just mentioned, where it's like, hey, here's a suggestion. Juliana does this great on our team. One of our coworkers does this all the time, like on PRs of mine, like, hey, this is a suggestion, non-blocking, just like you said, or nitpick
yeah,
or something like you said, which is really great because I can look at it and that gives me the option to have the conversation there too. If it's just like a no, there's no room for the conversation. But if it's like
yeah,
a hey, this is a a suggestion or non-blocking, then we can have a conversation around like why did I do this? Why did she make this suggestion?
yeah.
Whoever you're talking to on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just another thing about like writing in the pull request template and the issues, I find, and I know I'm not the only one, other folks have told me this too, when you write things down, your brain will process it more. It's like you're taking time to write it down, and then it's like,
Hmm.
okay, maybe it's not that, maybe it's this. So like, I find it's just really, at least on my brain, I find it helpful when I write the things down too, because I get a little more clarity in my head.
Yeah.
So I'm
Well,
just laughing
I
because
think.
so
Oh, go ahead. Say what you were laughing about.
no, it's because I was checking the Twitch chat, but I'm seeing
Oh.
myself like 10 or 15 seconds in the past, and I'm going like
Oh.
this, and so
Okay.
anyways, yeah. So so
Oh.
go ahead.
All right. So I think unless anyone in the chat has sort of questions about what we've been talking about in general, for time's sake, it would be great if we kind of moved into Gitpod, which is something that
Yeah,
Nick and coworkers have worked a lot on recently to get it to a good place so that people can use that. And we want to talk about how you could use that if you want to contribute to Forum and the issues that we have and why it might make that a little bit easier for you than in the conventional way we've had for being able to work on the project.
yeah. So and also just a little context about Gitpod. I'm pretty sure I have to check the history, but I think it was an external contributor that originally introduced this to the code base. It's
Mm-hmm.
been in the Forum project. Well, it used to be the Dev 2 code base, but it's been in the
Mm-hmm.
project since 2019. And
Okay.
I think when we moved the code base to Forum and then we started generalizing things, I think some
Mm-hmm.
things broke at some point. I know Dan Uber, who's one of our coworkers, he put a lot of work into this, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
there's a few others. I'd have to check the Git commit history, but recently I did some fixes as well. And the reason why we're suggesting to use this is a pain point that Christina and I have seen several times when we pair with people is Form's a large project and it takes a while to get it set up. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's been 2 to 3 hours because like people will run into issues. We do have really good documentation about the installation process for Linux, Windows, and Mac, but people still run into issues and it can be overwhelming. So Gitpod is definitely a great option. And I'm going to show
Yeah,
you
I think it's
first.
definitely overwhelming too for people who want to, like, say you want to come in and you just want to help with like a front end issue or accessibility or something, and you don't really
Yeah,
know Ruby. That whole ecosystem isn't something you have. That's been the biggest blocker, I think, for most people is people coming in not really knowing like Ruby, Rails stuff, but wanting to help on our front end, and then having to like go through the setup of everything you need to be able to do that. So this is where this is really
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, for sure. So the first thing I would suggest is Gitpod has a browser extension, and what it does is I don't know if it does it for Git. Yeah, it does support GitLab too. Okay. But basically, it'll generate a link that starts off with gitpod.io slash and then the pound symbol. And then after
Hmm.
that, it's the name of the repository that you're going to load into Gitpod, assuming that that repository supports Gitpod, because you do have to
Hmm.
configure it to work with it. Um, I find the having this button here, it's just a lot more easy. But if
Hmm.
I copy the link here, all you need to do is like I just said. So I can't zoom this in because it's in the address bar, but
Yeah.
you'll see it's gitpod.io/the # and then in this case, it's https github.com/NikkiTOnline, which is me /forum.
Yep.
And so that's the easiest way to go ahead and load Gitpod. The other thing I'll mention before we go into Gitpod is the first thing, as an external contributor, you can't use the Forem repository to push up a branch and stuff because you're not on the core team
Mhm.
or you don't have rights. So the first thing to do is go to github.com/forum/forum and then click on the fork button here. And I've already forked it, so it's telling me it's already forked. But if you're doing this for the first time, it'll say like, do you want to fork it to whatever your username is /forum. If you're part of organizations like I am here, you can also
Mhm.
fork them to there, but most likely you'll probably want to fork it to your username.
Yeah.
And so then you click on that, and then what'll happen is it does take a little while to load up at first, the first time.
Mhm.
It could be anywhere between like 8 and maybe 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
which might sound like a long time, but if you compare that to like potentially 2 to 3 hours of us pairing with somebody to help somebody get it installed, this is like amazing. And
Yeah.
there's
But we
other
want you to
projects
be
that will,
aware that it could be
yeah,
like 8 to 10 minutes so that you don't think you're doing something wrong. It does take a little time the first time.
yeah. And my coworker Eric did a Loom video about this, which I don't know if we
Mhm.
can link to that. It was for a workshop I gave last week at CodeLand,
It's
but
on our YouTube too. I'll find it.
okay,
It's
cool.
on her YouTube.
Okay. So once you start Gitpod, and if you've never used Gitpod before, it'll ask you to create an account. You can log in with GitHub or you can use your email. But if you are, most likely you'll probably create it with GitHub because you've forked something, so you already have a GitHub account or so once it loads up, I've already loaded it because I didn't want to spend 10 minutes of me just talking saying it's loading. Um, you'll end up on a screen in the browser that looks almost identical to Visual Studio Code. It's like GitHub Code Spaces if you've maybe used that, or if you use that new feature in GitHub where if you press the dot in the browser, it'll switch to like a VS Code like view, in case folks didn't know. Um, but what it gives you though is, so you have all the tools that you're used to. If you don't use Visual Studio Code, this will be new to you, but I know a lot of folks do use Visual Studio Code. And we have like recommended browser extension, sorry, VS Code extensions, which you can install, which is the little prompt I just clicked on. It's going to install all of those. You can also link like a setting. So if you want to keep your settings for all your Gitpod stuff, it unfortunately doesn't sync with the ones that VS Code does. It's like a separate one for some reason.
Mm.
But you can basically have your layout however you want, your theme and all that. But when it gets to the contributing, what's going to happen is when this first loads up, and I'll try and zoom in a bit here. Yeah, okay, it's
Mhm.
working okay. Okay, you're gonna have some windows open potentially at the top there, but the first thing you're gonna see is you're gonna see this terminal in the bottom, and if you look on the right here, I've just selected it. It says open site :GP. So this is a terminal session running, and what it's
Mhm.
doing is it's just running a startup script to say GP is just a Gitpod tool to do some things in there. But what it's doing is it's saying it's waiting for port 3000 here. So it's waiting because the whole thing is installing the first time. And then if you look in this other terminal session called Forem server, you can see this is our web server running now. So when you first load up, this won't be ready right away. But once it is, then you get the browser showing up in here. So this is the Forem project here. If I just zoom this down, so this is
Mhm.
literally a full-blown development environment to work on Forem. So I can log in, and currently it's in Gitpod's kind of preview tab, which is not an actual browser tab, but you can open this into another tab. But I'm not going to do that right now, but I just want to show you that because people were asking this, and I've updated this in the documentation for Gitpod, but there is
Hmm.
one user that comes with the with the project when you first start up. So it's called admin@forem.local, and the password is just password. And then I can log in, and then you're gonna see you're always gonna have the logs down here,
Hmm.
and so you can see what's going on here. So if you do end up with errors at some point, those logs are there for you to take a peek. And then because this is the first time I'm doing this, because folks on Dev 2, which is where probably most of the folks are coming from, our onboarding has changed over time. So like you might not have even seen this in a while. But it's the first thing you'll come to. And then I'm just going to skip all these things and continue for now.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm gonna finish, and then I'm logged in, and then so I have a user now, and then I can start doing development. So I'm gonna close all these. Here, let
Hmm.
me close the other ones. Where is it? Oh, yeah, just so we can open up some things. Okay, so because it's like Visual Studio Code, even if you use something like Atom Editor or whatever, it has all the functionality of those two things. So like if you press Command P if you're on Mac, or if you press Control P on Windows or Linux, you'll oh, whoops, that's the print screen. This is the only kind of awkward thing that happens sometimes if you don't have focus on the window, like native browser stuff will kick in. So if I put focus back here and I press Command P, why is it doing it? Ah, maybe I have to be down here. Of course, it's a live demo, so that's why these things are happening. Okay, so if I
Yeah.
do
Well.
Command P now, I can start typing. So let's say I'm working on a front end thing, and let's say I just know some of the files in here. So subscription, is that it? Yeah. So I'm gonna say, okay, I've got to fix a bug in this Preact component. So then I have the editor and everything. So like, let's come
Nice.
here, for example. Um, I'm gonna open up the browser. One thing I'll show here is, um, and this is in VS Code too, but because we're in the browser, there's all these ports running, and so the one that's our
Hmm.
website is port 3000, which is what you see in the simple browser there. But because we're in a browser, all these things need to be HTTPS. So it's not actually, if you were doing this on your local machine, the website would be localhost colon 3000. But here it uses something called port forwarding. So if I click on the open browser here,
Hmm.
it's going to open up this. It's the same site that was in there, but you're going to see that this is not localhost, obviously, because you're on the internet
Yeah.
now. So this is the this is the site that Gitpod gives you, and because the website is on port 3000, the name of the website is just prefixed with that. And I'm only mentioning that because like so let's say let's see here. Let's go to here now, and I'm gonna say like, okay, so this is the subscribe button,
Hmm.
and this is what this component is here. So I'm gonna just go and say like, look for subscribe. Of course, I'm not gonna. Where is it? I haven't been in this in a while. I just want to show that you can actually change something.
Hmm.
And is that it? Let's do that. Check the case. Okay, here. So I'm just going to put in my favorite word, YOLO, and then I'm going to come back here. Now, don't forget that we're in the browser, but the website is still running. I have autosave enabled on in my settings, so when I lose focus, it's going to save it. So if I come back to here, it should update it. It says subscribe right now, but so
And
it
just so you
does
know,
save
you
it.
are
Yeah.
still having a little bit of mic issues, we've been told in the chat.
Okay, that's really odd because I tested all of this with our podcast engineer, so I'm not sure what's up.
Yeah. It
Um,
just occasionally goes to like a really high and then like low, but
okay, that's pretty
YOLO.
odd. I don't know. Yeah, so you can see it's changed. So right away, I'm just working in the project. I'm in the browser. It's kind of mind blowing, honestly.
Yeah.
So you can do all the work in here, and then you can, whether you're in that simple browser view, like if you come here, you can see that it's going to say YOLO now down here. Or is that one? Maybe that one's different. Oh yeah, this one's different in this simple browser, maybe. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, so you can just keep making changes, and same thing for the back end. There is one thing to note. We're working on um, getting the end-to-end tests working in here right now. It's something I spent a
Hmm.
couple days on. It's a little more complicated than I've anticipated because of
Mm,
the port forwarding I was showing you there. But so
yeah.
for now, you can still write your tests in here, but for the moment, it'll run on the when you push up your changes, it'll run that test on the pull request, like in the continuous integration. I'm looking to get that sorted out pretty soon. Um,
Hmm.
but in the back end, you can write your unit tests and stuff. But I think for some of the back end tests because we do still have some tests that use, it's a project called Capybara for Ruby. So it loads a website to test some things, kind of like what we're doing with Cypress with these end-to-end tests. And there's some work that needs to be done there. But for the most part, you're like, if you're just trying to get up and running, this is like a really great option. Um, the only thing I'll say is you don't have to use this. It's just we've encountered a lot of times where folks really struggle to get the project working, even with the really good documentation.
Yeah.
Um, but if you do want to install it locally, I work locally all day. The documentation at developers.forem.com that Christina dropped, it's super helpful, and it's definitely possible. Like a lot of us have done it. It's just again, like Christina was saying, I just want to fix this button on this page. Do I really want to spend 3 hours potentially doing this? So that's why Gitpod's like an excellent candidate for something like that. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna try and start working in Gitpod more just to kind of see if there's pain points,
Hmm.
just to see, but that's kind of a quick tour of it. Yeah, I don't
Awesome.
know if I know we're
By
at
the
one
way,
o'clock now.
if everyone was watching Nick do some commands and things and talking about VS Code, he has a community. I'm plugging him
Oh,
that you can join.
shameless plug.
Um, yeah, so VS
I'll
Code tips.
I'll
I'm dropping the
I'll drop
link.
it. Okay. And I did this during my talk this week. I did shamelessly plug myself, but there was a good reason why I did it.
Hmm.
Because you can actually create your own forums now. The
Yep.
the code was always there, so you could create your own forum, but you would have to do all the steps to set it up. So our systems team has done a lot of amazing work to basically you have to configure a few things, and then you just run a script. I'm hosting mine on DigitalOcean, and it's pretty seamless. I update it usually sometimes once a day, sometimes every couple days. But you know, it's just if that's something you're interested in, definitely give it a go. That's if you go to, I'll drop the link to our, I don't know if corporate site's the right name, but if you just go to forem.com, like the company site, it talks about self-hosting. And also, if you're a bigger company or you're just looking for some kind of enterprise solution, we also provide cloud hosting. I honestly do not know the pricing, so
Don't
I'm
either.
not going to throw out any numbers. But yeah, you can contact somebody. Yeah. Um, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to touch on, Christina. I know we're going to be streaming throughout Hacktoberfest.
Yeah.
Um,
We're going to be doing our regular streams on Wednesdays that we do called Walkthrough Wednesdays. We have a couple guests this month. And then we will also be adding in a few others that are more Hacktoberfest specific. Nick and I haven't nailed that down yet on the days, but as soon as we do, I'll put out a post probably on forum or on dev, just kind of mentioning what's coming up as far as our Twitch
yeah.
schedule. And yeah, I think that's it. I think this was a good run through. If you, like I said, I dropped a bunch of resources, but if you go to dev .to, they have a lot of threads on like finding contributors. So for maintainers to say
Hmm.
what they want to have um, someone working on their project, they have threads on just like how are you doing. There's threads on just
Yeah.
what is Hacktoberfest and how to get started, and also to find our issues. So definitely check that out. They pushed a lot of stuff out today for the first day of
Hmm.
Hacktoberfest, so you can find all that information there as well.
Yeah. And speaking of dev too, depending on when you signed up, I think for Hacktoberfest, but there should be an email there. We encourage you, if you do contribute to Hacktoberfest, consider blogging about what you worked on, and
Hmm.
add the Hacktoberfest tag. You can see previous years in terms of examples if you want, but it's a fun way to just talk about what you did. It's a bit of the learning in public too, you know.
Any pain
So
points, anything that went well? It's a good way to like
yeah,
also try to get that information down in your own brain if you're like trying to, apply for a job later on or something. Maybe able to like talk through kind of what you did is like a great resource to have.
yeah, and who knows? Maybe it'll make it in the top 7. Who knows? Who
Woohoo.
knows?
Then you get a badge.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. Well, I think that's all we got for this week. Yeah,
Yes,
cool.
thank you everyone.
Yeah, and like Christina said, next week we're gonna have Brian Douglas from Github on Wednesday.
Woo,
So
more
definitely check
GitHub.
that out. Yeah, so GitHub, open source, all the good things. Really excited to have B Dougie on the stream. And yeah, we wish you a happy weekend, happy Hacktoberfest, and we will see you next week. Take care.